What are you telling yourself to create this torturous belief that you have no worth, that you're not good enough, that you'll never be good enough, and that things are hopeless? Where is the evidence? And part of the brilliant offerings of the REBT approach is the reminder, and it's a choice, but of the importance of developing unconditional self-acceptance, that every one of us, if we're a human, we haven't graduated yet to the angelic realm, maybe, I don't know, whatever your belief system. And so we're fallible. We're likely to make mistakes, which are no cause for catastrophizing and opportunities for learning and moving on from and jumping off points to better.
Welcome to the Mind Tracks podcast, where we explore practical tools to live with clarity, courage, and fulfillment. I'm Dr. Paul Scheele, and today I'm honored to be joined by Dr. Debbie Joffe Ellis, a leading voice in Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy, and someone who has spent decades teaching one of the most empowering principles in psychology: that you are not disturbed by what happens to you, you're disturbed by what you tell yourself about what happens. In this conversation, we dive into the unconscious beliefs we hold that often shape our emotions, decisions, and experiences. Debbie explains why so many people get stuck in cycles of fear, guilt, or self-doubt, and how understanding the mind's patterns can unlock real freedom. We explore how to recognize the irrational beliefs that hold us back, how to challenge them without judgment, and why self-compassion is essential. Debbie shares insights from her decades of work helping people break free from anxiety, self-criticism, and limiting mental loops. If you've ever felt trapped by your own thoughts or wondered how to move past fear into authentic confidence, this episode is a guide to practical transformation you can apply today. Let's get started. Dr. Debbie, it's so wonderful to be with you. Thanks for coming into the Mind Tracks podcast.
Dr. Paul, thank you so much for having me. It's a delight. Every time we've interacted, there's this visceral smile that kind of comes up from the heart up, and it's great to be with you. Thank you for inviting me to speak with you.
Yes, that's so good. Well, you're in New York City and I'm in Minneapolis. We're a long ways from each other, but we love hanging out whenever we do, and I hope we can do a lot more of it. So I want to help our listener understand, get oriented a little bit to who you are and the work that you do. I first heard about the work of Dr. Albert Ellis and Rational Emotive Behavioral Therapy and REBT. There he is, there's the man. And when you and I met, when we were in a conference together presenting in Puebla, Mexico, we fell madly in love with each other's work and have been good friends since. And you actually connected me to the roots of REBT and corrected me in making sure it was Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy. And now I get it. What our listener might need to know is a little bit of the background of why in the 50s Albert came to this work and what makes this so different from other forms of traditional talk therapy that existed up to his point in the world.
What a great question. Well, Albert Ellis was literally a genius. And we don't have the time for me to give you his whole life story, in particular leading up to his choice of being a therapist, other than to say he endured a lot of suffering physically and emotionally from childhood onwards. And in his brilliant way, even as a little kid, he found ways to suffer less sadness and depression. For example, he was very ill, often in hospitals for weeks or months at a time, and his parents rarely visited. And a lot of us would understandably feel sad and depressed as little kids. We might not know that big word depression, but we might cry or be inward or tantrum or all of the above. And this little bright spark of genius in a frail boy form at the age of 3.5 decided he didn't want to feel so sad. And so he looked for things to do to distract himself from the sad reality. So when he wasn't in too much pain, of course, he wasn't, at hospital for camp activities, but when he was up to it, he would borrow books from the children's library in the hospital, or talk to visitors who came to other children on the ward, or daydream what he would do when he grew up, or he would daydream about baseball heroes he had at the time and so forth. So even at a young age, there was this incredible impetus to suffer less. And again, because I don't have time to go into detail, let's fast forward to him recognizing his desire to help other people suffer less. He's studying psychology at Columbia University here in New York City. And I'm just going to throw it in that it continues to touch my heart that these days I teach in the very building where Al studied psychology and got his master's and PhD. So anyway, at that time, and now I'm getting onto your specific question, there wasn't much choice if you wanted to be a therapist than to study Freud, who at that time was the lord of the psychotherapeutic universe, Sigmund Freud, psychoanalysis, or a early behaviorism. And so Al did that, and then he was practicing, and he was a brilliant psychoanalyst. But he was disenchanted with it. He was noticing as he continued to practice that while some of his, they were called patients mostly then, we might prefer the term, a lot of people who are therapists now prefer the term clients, but whatever, people he was working with felt better after a session, and some got some good insights. But that wasn't helping a whole lot of them get better. They would feel better, they might have an insight or vented, some energy released, a little understanding maybe from the therapist, but they were continuing, Al recognized, to think in self-defeating ways, to think in the ways that created the unhealthy emotions. He recognized, based on his own observation, constructivism and brilliance, and influenced by predecessors as far back as Stoic philosophers, Eastern philosophers, and some elements of the work of Alfred Adler. And so with what he learned and with what he observed and constructed creatively anew, he was very clear that it wasn't circumstances that created emotions, but what we told ourselves about unwanted circumstances. And furthermore, he was able brilliantly, the first one, to distinguish between healthy and unhealthy so-called negative emotions. Negative here meaning not so pleasant. And a lot of therapies, there are positive and negative. A negative would be sadness and depression and anxiety and rage and anger. And Al was able to distinguish between the healthy ones that are motivating and life-enhancing, or part of a healthy life, such as grief. Aches like heck, but it's part of the healthy tapestry of a life journey if we live long enough. Yeah, we lose people or chapters in life are over that we loved. So Al bit by bit became more active, directive in his sessions with his patients, with typically psychoanalysis, the therapist is quite passive, but will offer interpretation, and no homework was given. There wasn't really psychoeducation, and Al started educating his clients, patients, about empowering them. You create your emotions. It's not your mother looking at you cross-eyed. He often used that expression, whatever. And started writing articles that slowly were published. Originally, he was damned and made fool of and called simplistic by the majority of his peers who were psychoanalysts. Anyway, because we don't have hours and hours, Dr. Paul, just to fast forward to originally in the 1950s, early when he brought it out, he had very little support. He persisted, more and more people recognized, yeah, wow. Dr. Aaron Beck, who's now considered the father of cognitive behavior therapy, approached him for mentorship and guidance. And more than a decade later, Dr. Beck came out with, originally it was called cognitive therapy, now known as cognitive behavior therapy. And in conclusion of this monologue, thank you for your patience, many other highly effective approaches stand on the shoulders of the work of Albert Ellis, who acknowledged the work of the Stoics, other philosophers, and Alfred Adler. DBT, ACT, other cognitive approaches. I hear evangelical TV people include principles of REBT, coaching, executive coaching, positive psychology. So in conclusion of this monologue, Albert Ellis changed the world of psychotherapy, and his influence continues.
Yeah, it's so good that it's so good that it's continuing through you as
I'm one of them.
as someone who lived with him, married to him. The work is so important and so transformative. And when you think about Stoic philosophers, and I absolutely love reading Epictetus and all the others, it's so close to the way I do my work and my coaching and my teaching. So I've always had a great affinity for it, and I'm glad to know that it really lives in you and through you. So thank you for all the good work that you're doing. I'd like to go back to this idea that that events don't cause our emotions. It's our beliefs that do. And how do you help people take emotional responsibility without turning that into self-blame, actually defeating them for creating beliefs or maintaining beliefs that harm them?
Well, until most of us are informed that we have a choice about how we feel, how cruel to flagellate ourselves and blame ourselves for doing something that causes pain when we didn't know other options.
Well, I'll give you a great example of that is people who recognize that negative thinking is bad, and then they try to negate negative thinking. And, oh, well, that's very negative. I shouldn't be negative. I can't be so negative. And it's just this crazy loop. And yeah, that self-flagellation is a no-win scenario. So what's the way out through REBT?
With awareness, we have choice. So one suggestion is, and this is what REBT and superb and empowering teachers like you, Dr. Paul, do, is teach us the specifics of thinking in healthy ways. So that helps us recognize when we're not doing so. We can pause, dispute the unhealthy, irrational thinking, which then begets a healthy alternative, not Pollyanna, la, 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 romantic, everything's rosy, it's for the best. I mean, some things, if we think it can be for the best, we can certainly lemonade from lemons, right? But not everything is good. What's empowering is accepting not everything is good and reminding ourselves that we can stand it. Unless it kills us or we're cognitively impaired, we often are stronger than we are aware of. So again, back to the specifics of your question, I'd love to very quickly distinguish between the healthy thinking that creates healthy emotions and the unhealthy thinking that includes the shooting on ourselves that creates the unhealthy emotions.
Okay, yes, because shoulds, oughts, musts are these demands that we place on ourselves and others place on us, and we place on others that tend to perpetuate the sort of irrational behavior. And why is that, first of all, irrational? And then how is that corrected through awareness?
Yeah. So starting with the second one, it can be corrected only if a person is motivated to change. And if they're not aware that they're thinking, feeling, acting in self-defeating ways, if they're complacent and, well, that's just the way I am, that's just the way he is and always will be, we accept and unfortunately limit the possibility of a more empowering and less miserable life.
Well, and I have heard that rejection from people that says, "What do you mean I create? I construct my reality? No way." And they just have an instant knee-jerk reaction to it. If they're not motivated to take ownership over their own life and they still want to be victim of the world that they see, there's probably not a whole lot of opportunity for them to make a shift.
Yeah, exactly. If we're observing that in another person as their friend, partner, or therapist, um, or the best that one can do in all probability is to perhaps point out, look at the impact of you continuing to think in such a negative way.
Mm-hmm.
There are alternatives to try and motivate them, depending on what they're receptive to. Some people are receptive to the fact that, in a recent Journal of the American Medical Association, there's
Yeah.
proof that if you hold on to anger, you're likely to have greater cardiovascular issues and die 15 years sooner than you might have if you practice daily gratitude and work on not creating and harboring anger, because what good does that do? Now, I want to distinguish between healthy anger, healthy meaning we don't react, we're in control, we choose what we say and what we do. But for example, if we receive or observe cruel, brutal treatment or behavior, that healthy kind of no can motivate us to think about what might be the most constructive, helpful thing I can do here.
It is a motivator. It does get us to take action. No
Yeah,
question. Anger is helpful. And living from a place of rage is not as good as living from a place of passion and standing on a value that you truly want to bring forward.
I love the way you say that. So I might stick in here, if I may, the difference between the healthy and the unhealthy negative emotions that I mentioned. And so starting with healthy anger, moral anger, and again, we don't react impulsively.
Mm.
Breathe, think things through. Rage, I don't have to elaborate on. Other example, anxiety, panic, fear. The healthy alternative is not hey, it's all going to be okay, man, because you probably won't study enough to pass the exam if that's what you're telling yourself in that example. So the healthy alternative is concern. There's still a little kick of adrenaline and a realization, well, I have 3 more days. I can panic, I can procrastinate, or I can make a plan. So concern is motivating. Anxiety can be debilitating. Depression. I don't want to get out of bed in the morning. Life has no meaning and worse. A healthy alternative is sadness, disappointment, and grief, which I touched on before.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things REBT helps us do is get more comfortable with discomfort.
I love that.
Recently, I felt a lot of grief. Fortunately for me, for many decades, I'm doing the best I can to walk my talk. And so I don't increase the grief by worrying about the fact that I'm feeling grief and telling myself the lie that I shouldn't be.
Good. Yeah,
But
nice distinction.
but grief is not, is I still wake up in the morning motivated to live my life. So
Yeah.
see how that's healthy, painful as heck, but healthy, whereas depression, life has no meaning.
Let me let
Further
me
example,
let me throw out two examples. Self-doubt and a sense of unworthiness. What do you do with these? Because, when we look at a complex society with a lot of uncertainty going forward, it's easy for people to say, well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do anything about my life in this condition. What do you do to help someone over these?
yeah. Well, I think initially, whether it's a friend or colleague or family member, or if you're working as a therapist, a client, just having empathy, demonstrating empathy,
Mm,
that one cares, that this is part of the human condition, that it's common. So to humanize it, particularly if they're having, that person is having a tendency to damn themselves way too easily.
mhm.
And, additional unhealthy negative emotions, shame and guilt
Ooh, bad
are
ones, yeah.
experienced by the people suffering in the way that you just asked about. The healthy
Mhm.
counterpart is regret.
Oh, okay.
And again, and so how to help people. A first step after hopefully listening and providing an atmosphere of I accept you, modeling that unconditional acceptance of them, even if they're acting or thinking in ways that aren't helpful, is to investigate using the language they relate to. So if your therapist talking to a friend, don't sound like a therapist. Be the friend,
Right.
and if you're a therapist, you can still in that appropriate professional way, with healthy boundaries, because for the sake of the client, it better be clear to them that you're their support, you're their encourager, etc. But you're not the friend that they can call at midnight. And part of the good therapist's work is helping a person learn how to be their best friend and reach out to others as appropriate. So anyway, one of the things to investigate is what are you telling yourself to
Yes.
create this torturous belief that you have no worth, that you're not good enough, that you'll never be good enough, and that things are hopeless. Where is the evidence? And part of the things, the brilliant offerings of the REBT approach is the reminder, and it's a choice, but it's the importance of developing unconditional self-acceptance that every one of us, if we're a human, we haven't graduated yet to the angelic realm, maybe, I don't know, whatever your belief system. And so we're fallible. we're likely to make mistakes, which are no cause for catastrophizing, and opportunities, and you teach this so magnificently, Dr. Paul, for learning and moving on from and jumping off points to better. And so that we're fallible. And one of the premises of REBT is that every human has worth simply because we exist. We
Love
may
that.
do bad things. If we're alive, we're able to learn from them, attempt to make amends, do things differently, ask for forgiveness if that's relevant. If someone else has acted atrociously, and this can be hard for a lot of us, but it's important to realize the more we harbor hate, we don't really hurt them. We are shortening our own lives.
Yeah, and this really is where the behavioral components of this work come from. It's one thing to have that we presuppose that by nature of us being alive, we have inherent worth. It's another thing to help someone recognize it behaviorally in the world, to practice that as a way of being in the world. And of all the things you and I have talked about through the years, and I've had you speak at my inner circles, and the idea that we keep coming back to that is unconditional positive self-regard and unconditional positive other regard. Would you say a little bit about that and why that is so central to REBT?
Yes, of course, with pleasure. So if a person has had very cruel messages drummed into them from childhood, and in childhood, we don't have the ability to discern. There's
No,
just
we had
pure
no
fault.
filters. We're just taking it all in, right?
Exactly.
And from the people that are supposed to be loving and helping us. So if
Yeah,
they say, you're no good, you have to do better, you shouldn't do that. Yeah, those messages, they go deep.
very deep, very cruel. And it's little wonder that as a person grows older and becomes an adult, if they're not encouraged for one reason or another to self-reflect and to be aware of what they're feeling, and to be encouraged to think about their thinking. If they're not taught the mind, emotion, and then action connection, as we said earlier, they keep doing what they've habitually done, what they've observed, what through osmosis has formed their thought patterns. And so it can be difficult, but difficult certainly does not mean impossible. It can be difficult initially. A person had better be motivated to be willing to accept that our behavior, our achievements, what we've been told, what we believe, do not determine our worth. We have worth because we exist. Well, they're very lovely, lofty words. Yes, so believe this now. Yeah, lots of love. And so finding a way to digest that is key. I'm thinking of an example of a man I was working with. I'm not going to give details or names, obviously, or the context with which I was doing this. But long story short, he was in his 30s and in his teens had gotten with a rowdy bunch of teens, and they did petty crimes until they did a major crime, and he was imprisoned for many years. And as a result of that, all of his 20s in jail, his family suffered, he suffered. Lucky for him, he made the most of his time in jail. He read, he studied as much as he could in the prison. He was fit and so forth. When he came out, he decided that he wanted to be a therapist and help people. And so he was doing the best he could. And he said to me, he loves REBT. He agrees up here with the importance of having unconditional self-acceptance. But he, up until that point, had not succeeded in achieving that. He felt guilty. He felt ashamed. Now, in the course of our conversation, it was clear he loved nature and trees. And there's a reason I'm bringing that up. So at some point as we were talking, I did a segue into, by the way, let's call him John, which isn't his name. John, I noticed outside there's this magnificent, very old tree, but it's got parasites. And it looks like kids have carved initials in there. And the surrounds are so beautiful. Wouldn't it be better to get rid of that tree and plant a new one? And he was immediately, no, I love that tree. It's beautiful and birds and this. And I said, but it's so, it's got those imperfections. It's old. And he started to get it. And he's like, but he maintains, no. And then I said to him, John, how is that tree any more a part of nature than you are? And he understood that he was easily able to accept that part of nature with its imperfections, which meant he had the ability to do that, just hadn't believed he could practice it on himself vigorously enough. That helped him change his life. Ongoing practice daily, because the old blah, blah, blah comes up. And neuroplasticity proves, and you know more than that about that than I do, but at least 30 days, right, of repetition will form the new neural pathways. And so he was able to change. So it's just an example of how, if we're motivated to recognize what we're telling ourselves that's causing the pain, to think about things realistically and differently, and then repeat the new healthy ways of thinking is one of the ways of developing that. And then really quickly, how do we unconditionally accept another person who's committed an atrocious act? It's possible. I think 10 plus years ago in Charleston, South Carolina, a disturbed young man joins a Bible class and then shoots most of the people there and the preacher. And in the news that night, and it's still, I feel teary when I remember some of the relatives of those who were killed said, we forgive him. Now, they were helped by their religious beliefs. Not everyone has religious beliefs, but it's proof that with a certain mindset, we don't have to stay enraged. We don't have to be enraged. And so if one does not want to harbor hatred for the rest of one's life, the willingness to consider that if I had that person's upbringing, their genetic makeup, were taught the messages they were taught when they were 3 years old. If I had joined a community that spouted hate, and if I was thinking what they were thinking when they did what they did, isn't it likely I would have done the same thing? And so it's an opportunity to hate the bad action, but not the vulnerable human who probably, if they were healthier, would not have chosen to do that. It's a choice.
Yeah, it's a big framework and probably a life of work to live with the grief and also with the forgiveness that's available. I remember a story of a woman whose son was murdered, and in the courts, she forgave that man who went to prison for the murder of her son. When he came out of prison, she adopted him.
Wow.
And the story of their life is just so precious and such an example of this unconditionality. And I've often used that when somebody is in a place that's very difficult for them, making demands of how other people should be, to make that shift to an unconditional positive self-regard and positive other regard is really an important work, and it creates so much more freedom and joy. Now, this is different than trying to improve my self-image or even self-esteem. It's like self-esteem on steroids.
Uh,
Self-esteem is an unconditional positive regard. The practice of it goes beyond feeling better about oneself.
yeah.
There's
Well,
something else to it. Yeah,
yeah. So Al, Albert Ellis, he wrote a book called, excuse me, The Myth of Self-Esteem. He
good.
actually wanted to call it Why Self-Esteem is a Sickness, but the publishers didn't like that too much. And so the thrust of it is what's healthy is to develop unconditional self-acceptance. Self-esteem for many people implies I think well of myself because I can do this, because I've got that, because I look a certain way. And REBT reminds anyone who will listen that being attached and basing our worth to anything that's temporary is a road to probable suffering at some point.
Nice. That's really a powerful, powerful distinction, isn't it? It's that
Yeah, I like
concept. Yeah, it's a very transcendent concept. It's certainly what Buddhist philosophy is all about, right?
it. Yes.
Is everything's temporary. And if we attach our worth to something that's temporary, we're in a lot of trouble because things will change.
Inevitably.
So
Yeah.
where do you form an attachment to unconditional positive self-regard?
Oh, sneaky question. You're so good at those, Dr. Paul. Um, I have a healthy desire for it. A
Ah, good.
healthy desire is different from demanding.
Yes. And the distinction between demanding and a preference, if we could make that, it would be quite helpful, I think. Could you explain that?
I would love to. And it's part of the distinction between the healthy rational thinking that creates healthy negative emotions and the unhealthy irrational thinking that creates the unhealthy ones that I mentioned before: anxiety, guilt, shame, rage, depression. Unhealthy. Healthy, concern, moral, ethical anger, sadness, grief, disappointment, and regret. So, shooting on yourself, musts, oughts, rigid thinking, lack of humor, blowing things out of proportion, catastrophizing, awfulizing, low frustration tolerance. I must have what I want when I want it, little baby that I am, and damning oneself and others and life. When things don't go the way we foolishly tell ourselves they should. And what creates the healthy emotions, the opposite to that, preferring what we want, having goals, having passionate desires, that if we don't get one of them or some of them or all of them, we're likely to feel healthily sad, disappointed, bit of grief. That's very different from rage or hopelessness and depression. So wanting what we want, having humor, keeping things in perspective, high frustration tolerance. I love this mantra. I can stand what I don't like. I just don't like it. Not overgeneralizing, not catastrophizing, not awfulizing. And finally, what you brought up is so core to REBT and Buddhism and healthy thinking: unconditional self-acceptance, unconditional other acceptance, and unconditional life acceptance. And you asked earlier
Hmm.
about people's attachment to certainty. Lots of luck. I mean, what in fact is certain except maybe nothing? And I can't even say, I used to say death and taxes, or people did. Some people don't pay taxes. And the way things are going now, maybe some of us won't even die or leave this body form. So anyway, getting comfortable with discomfort, accepting uncertainty as part of life, additional keys to healthy emotions and less misery.
That's so gorgeous. And again, this idea that life is what it is, whether we like the details of it or not, and fashioning a way to navigate that really does start at our beliefs, at our acceptance, and our choices to do what we can do. A tolerance of ambiguity, embracing paradox, all of these are such important aspects of this work. Really, thank you so much. This has been really a lot of fun. So, as we wrap it up, I would like to ask Dr. Debbie, if someone is to apply REBT principles, let's say this week, to noticeably reduce unnecessary suffering, what would you suggest that they start with?
Yeah, a few
What
deep
is the
breaths.
awareness? We always come back to this idea of awareness. And I will say everybody who's here listening to us is already motivated. So
Yeah,
what brings it to the surface for us?
yeah. Perhaps the reminder that of how finite our life on this planet probably is, and how much do we want to suffer, and how willing are we to make the effort to suffer less. And I'm talking now particularly about emotions. And there hasn't been a year that I can think of in which there isn't something in our society and world that doesn't include some brutality and killing and immorality. And so what I suggest is, first of all, perspective taking and gratitude. I'm still here. What can I be grateful for?
Great gratitude, so powerful, right?
So powerful. Keeps things in perspective. If I can do something, let me make a plan, get up off my ass and do something, even if it's little. If
Hmm.
there's realistically on this day nothing I can do about that, to accept. To accept. I unfortunately on this day am not superwoman, can't change the planet yet. I can work on me. And so, what am I grateful for? What can I do? What can I do that I'm willing to accept my fallibility or about? And is there something else I can do that's constructive and proactive? How can I help another person one way or another? And it doesn't even have to be someone you know. On one of the darkest days of my life, the day after my husband died, and I'm walking through New York City feeling very alone, very unsupported, and grief. And a homeless man smiled at me, and that
Hmm.
changed my day. So, in our own way, doing something for someone else can be helpful. And the final thing I want to say, and I'm sorry if I'm taking too much time, is, and I'm looking at you, Dr. Paul.
Yes.
When each of us are willing to work on ourselves in that way, what's perfection? Not wait till we're perfectly evolved and unconditionally accept everything all the time. No, day by day, in a minuscule way, do what we can in a positive sense. I'm looking at you. We're models. We're inspirations for other people. See, when we first connected, before you started recording, just your smile, your presence, your energy, I felt good. I'm going through a bit of a hard time in life. I'll be fine. REBT is helping me. I really do my best to walk my talk daily, and it works. But your presence, before you even said anything, help me. And in the same way as you and as that homeless man on 7th Avenue, as we work on ourselves, just by our human striving in a positive direction. We act as a support potentially, or inspiration, or just a temporary help for other humans.
That's so gorgeous. I spoke with a man today. He said that a man at the gas station needed to get a cup of coffee for his wife, and he looked at these machines that where you have to push the buttons to have it ground and made, and he was completely lost. And this man came up to him and said, "Could I help you with that? What kind of coffee does your wife like? And what does she tend to do? And what would what would be best for her? And well, here, let me show you how to do this." When this man I was speaking to left the gas station, the man and his wife were outside waiting for him to thank him for his kindness. And I do want to say that even the smallest act of kindness can just pierce the heart and open it to the real love that's available to all of us. And I just loved watching you to recognize that even after all these years, just the memory of that homeless man smiling to you just brought you to that place of feeling verklempt. It's so
Yeah, that's the word.
powerful, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's so great. So thank you for
Mm.
your vulnerability, for your deep sharing, and for your continuing to teach this work and share it. Thank you, Dr. Debbie. Appreciate you
Well,
so much.
I appreciate you, Dr. Ford. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Dr. Debbie Joffe Ellis. One of the key takeaways is simple but powerful. The mind often convinces us we're in danger when we're not. That fear becomes a habit, but it doesn't have to control your life. And Debbie helped us recognize that it's not the events in our lives that determine how we feel. It's what we tell ourselves about those events. When we move from strict demands to healthy choices, and from blaming ourselves to accepting ourselves, we reduce unnecessary suffering and build emotional strength. To connect with Dr. Debbie Joffe Ellis, visit her website at www.debbiejoffelis.com. And now in the second part of the podcast, it's just you and me. I'll tell you how to use the paraliminal sessions in the Mind Tracks app to easily handle obstacles and move toward the success you want, especially as it relates to Debbie's message. If you're new to the relaxing paraliminal audio sessions, they use breakthrough technologies to activate your whole mind in only 20 minutes to help improve any area of your life. Let's get going. Hello and welcome back. Hopefully by now you can tell why I love Dr. Debbie's passion and enthusiasm and deep application of the work that she is carrying on through all of these years. The work that her late husband, Dr. Albert Ellis, promoted and brought to the world, and that she is carrying on and teaching throughout the world herself. It's powerful. It really does resonate with everything that I teach. And to bring paraliminal technology in to having you more effectively embody these principles and apply them in your life, this is cognitive behavioral therapy, if you want to think of it that way. Paraliminals are a great way to recognize the capacity and capabilities to live into many of these key principles that Dr. Debbie was talking about. So I've chosen 5 areas to look at. The first is the idea of taking emotional responsibility. The second is freeing ourselves from demands like shoulds, oughts, and musts. The idea of rational compassion. The fourth area is unconditionality of self-acceptance and other acceptance. And finally, the idea of living the philosophy on a daily basis. So there are a lot of key ideas that we talked about. Let's talk first about this idea of emotional responsibility. This is the idea that we have a sense of agency and choice without blaming ourselves for anything we might have done wrong in the past or attacking ourselves for what we should have done differently. And so the belief paraliminal really is at the heart of this. Belief paraliminal looks at your life in terms of how certain beliefs got started. Um, there's an initial sensitizing event and a symptom producing event and a symptom intensifying event for any belief that may not be serving us that we would like to shift and change. And I follow that similar model to install within us beliefs that are more life enhancing, more life supporting, and get us to those goals and the life that we're truly interested in living. So, belief paraliminal, very powerful. And another paraliminal really helpful in this idea of taking emotional responsibility is anxiety free. While she talked about a number of negative, unsupportive emotions and emotions that are difficult but are actually part of living a human life, we can see that anxiety isn't one of those emotions that we should hang out with. And we can, in fact, change when we change our thinking about the future events that we're worried about. So it reduces emotional reactivity while preserving clarity and engagement in our life. Anxiety free is a really powerful one. The second area is the idea of freedom from demands, those musts, shoulds, ought tos, and how we can turn those from demands we're placing on ourselves and others into preferences that we can step into and use. So the first paraliminal I'd recommend is power thinking. This helps to identify and shift any rigid or more absolutist kind of thought patterns that create a lot of the suffering that we may be experiencing. The second, and I refer to this one quite a lot in my podcast, it's letting go that I did with Hale Dwoskin, who did Sedona Method. Sedona Method is great for recognizing that you really do have a choice when an emotion comes up, and rather than trying to resist it and pouring energy into maintaining it, what we resist persists, being able to welcome it, know that it's natural to be feeling it, and then have a choice about it, to let it go and choose a more positive emotion that may be more supportive for us. The third area is the idea of rational compassion. And this is the idea that clear thinking really supports us. It doesn't suppress emotions that are showing up. So the first one, first paraliminal I would recommend here is personal genius. That recommends in any area of your life where you realize you're on the threshold of creating something new, even though you might not feel that you're fully worthy or able to do it, personal genius brings that recognition that you do have an accelerated learner within you. You do have the ability to tap into a beyond genius capacity of intuition, problem solving, and emotional intelligence that can help you move forward in life. So you choose the area where you're applying that genius. If you apply it to the integration and application of rational emotive behavioral therapy, this is going to be a great one. The other paraliminal in this area is deep relaxation, which lowers a kind of emotional reactivity or intensity that may be going on when we feel overwhelmed by situations that we find ourselves in. And it really takes that sense of resistance out, allows us to be much more present, much more embodied in our life, whatever may be going on. Deep relaxation. The fourth area is the idea of unconditional acceptance. And we talked about unconditional positive self-regard, positive acceptance of ourselves, and unconditional other acceptance. And she brought up a third one, Dr. W referred to acceptance of life, unconditional. I studied with a woman named Byron Katie, and her book is called Loving What Is. It's very much an idea that's central to the work that Dr. Ellis started so many years ago. So there are two that are in this area of acceptance I think would be really good. The first is self-love, a beautiful way of accepting our past, our present, and the future we're choosing to create. It's a beautiful, powerful paraliminal. I really recommend it to anyone and everyone. The second one, and be careful when you hear it, it's called self-esteem supercharger. Now, if you know the background of the self-esteem supercharger, when I first started writing it, it was called the self-image supercharger. And then I got wind of this distinction that Albert Ellis made. The self-esteem, self-image isn't it? Self-esteem really isn't it. It's this idea of a positive and unconditional self-regard that isn't attached to any particular output, but it is to who you are in this world exactly as you are. So the essence of exactly the distinction that Dr. Debbie made is right here in that paraliminal. So consider both the self-love, self-esteem supercharger. And when you hear it, self-esteem supercharger, you'll actually hear those distinctions that are being made. And the final area is living the philosophy, really allowing ourselves to move from the inside of our EBT to the embodiment of these concepts. The first would be new action generator. So on anything that you heard that Dr. W and I spoke about, you say, ooh, that's one that I would really like. Then new action generator will help you put it into action. You would be able to set that as a goal, a target, and establish it and live into it on a daily basis. And it might be any of those ideas that she referred to at the end of our session, one of them being having a gratitude practice, right? Any of those ideas could be used in the new action generator. And the other paraliminal that I think could really be good here is success built to last. Because one of the messages that came through in our dialogue several times is the idea that we don't get a lot of things started because we have a sense that we're not going to be very good at it when we get it started. Well, success built to last is really about that. Because this is going to make a difference, because you love to do it, pursue that which you love most. And no matter how badly you do at it at first, engaging in it is still going to be allowing you to engage in something you love to do. So do the thing, you gain the power, and every single time that you engage in it, you're getting better and better and better at it. So build a life of success that's built to last. That's it. Thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure. I hope you can re-listen to the session with Dr. Debbie Joffe Ellis several times. A lot of good material there. Best wishes, peace and blessings. Hope to see you again very soon. Thanks for joining me today. I applaud your willingness to maximize your potential. You can easily use the paraliminal audio sessions in the MindTracks app to stimulate your non-conscious mind, that is your inner mind, to reduce any resistance in your life and propel you toward the success you want. Go to www.mindtracks.com/go. These amazing audio tools have helped millions, and I encourage you to bring them into your life today. Be sure to be back for more episodes of the MindTrack podcast. You'll find insightful conversations with authors, experts, and thought leaders, all devoted to improving your life's experience. And if you found value in this episode, be sure to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. Your support helps us keep the momentum of transformation going. Thank you again for being here on the Mind Tracks podcast.